Welcome viewers to this series of lectures on early Indian economy. In fact, we have been discussing various stages of economy in early Indian history, and earlier we have spoken of prehistoric times when mankind essentially was in the hunting gathering stage, taking it up to the beginning of agriculture, the Neolithic phase, subsequently the civilizational phase in the form of Harappan civilization, across to the Vedic times, early Vedic and later Vedic stages of early Indian economy, then across to the middle of the first millennium BCE, represented by urbanization, what we in Indian history refer to as second urbanization, the first being the Harappan situation, the Harappan civilization, profusion or in fact beginning of metallic currency in the form of punch-marked coins and long distance trade, commerce, etc. Also substantial changes in agriculture, agrarian technologies, particularly use of iron and so forth. And then we spoke of the Mauryan times, where the perspective is that of pan-India and state control of economy, down to the post-Mauryan times, where we refer to this period as almost the pinnacle of urbanization and coinage and overseas trade, commerce and so forth. Also, that it was a period of smaller farms, smaller polities and so forth. And this brings us to the subsequent stage, which we referred to in Indian history as Gupta period. But as you discover that this Gupta period, which began say from 320 CE and continued up to say the middle of the 6th century CE, there is a perceptible change, particularly towards the later part of the Gupta rule, and the post-Gupta period actually saw intensification of those changes, which in Indian historiography is also referred to as the beginning of feudalism. So, this particular lecture, alongside its counterpart in the second part, is about stages of economy in early India, feudal beginnings. So, as the normative understanding of Gupta age is that of golden times, we have temples coming up in a big way, we have kings issuing gold coins in good number, there is trade, there is overseas Roman trade going on across the Arabian Sea and so forth. So that's one image that we have of the Gupta period. But if you look at it from economic point of view as to what is happening in the economy during the period, you will realize that there are some very perceptible changes happening, particularly towards this later half of the Gupta age, or you can say post-Gupta period included, which were little out of sync with what was happening or what was the trajectory of economy in the earlier period. So, while this is the Gupta period to begin with is a period of money economy, foreign trade and so forth, subsequently say towards the 6th century CE, towards the end of the Gupta rule, we find some new tendencies developing in the domain of economy, and it had its pertinence on the polity that was weaved around this as well, and there is some kind of a change. And that change is sought to be understood by historians in terms of the model of feudalism. So all of us know that feudalism essentially refers to an economy premised on agriculture. So there is preponderance of agriculture in feudalism, and the component of trade, commerce, urban centers, etc. in the economy is at its low. It is only then that the situation for feudalism emerges. So these are almost the necessary preconditions for a feudal polity or society to grow upon it. And we realize that probably this is the situation developing in the later part of Gupta period, although there are counterpoints, there are counter viewpoints that are emerging that does not agree with this framing of Gupta economy as feudal economy. In fact, there are historians who don't agree with this appellation of feudalism for this period, later Gupta and post-Gupta period. And there are also different ways in which one can look at this long-term processes that we have been looking at in terms of economic changes that does not warrant usage of the term feudalism altogether. So it is this that we are trying to discuss, and we will also try to see as to how sources are informing us about the size of the plot, about land ownership, and different tendencies developing with respect to what we know as feudatories, how villages were granted, what kind of immunity these granted villages had in terms of taxation and administrative measures and so forth. So what we get to see here is that the trend of granting cultivated land to temples and Brahmins in Bengal is very much perceptible in the Gupta period. But these grants, particularly in Bengal, were sale transactions of plots of land, and they were effected by individuals with immunity from taxes. Now, so they are different from the other grants, where it is the king or the ministers who are making these grants. Rather, it is the individuals who are making these grants, and they are small plots of land. And particularly also noteworthy is the fact that this is all done with the permission of the central authority, central officials. So they are also taking into the loop. Whereas in the later part of the Gupta period, say in the 6th century CE and so forth, in central India, these grants are effected by feudatories, and the villages were granted alongside immunity from not only taxes, which even Bengal grants had immunity from taxes, but in central India these immunities included immunities from taxes as well as administration. So the administration of the donor, which otherwise was very much evident in the earlier period, or the central administration that was there, those administrative apparatus were not to be reckoned with in the granted villages. So the grant of villages contained immunity not only from taxes but also from the administration. So in general, from 5th century CE, the ruler seems to increasingly be giving up the control over all sources of revenue, which included pasturages, hides and charcoal, mines, salt, and all hidden treasures and deposits beneath the earth's surface. So these are some of the revenue areas that were very much under the control of the ruler in earlier period, but now perhaps they are also given up to the donee. However, what is contained with the donor is the right to punish thieves, which perhaps even in these times were retained by the ruler to begin with, and subsequently we find that even this right is ceded. So how do we get to know about all these? We get to know about all these from the details contained in the land grants, which usually happen to be copper plate charters strung around some wire or some metallic thread. It usually had 2 to 3 plates, and that contained something inscribed on it. And what was inscribed was at the behest of the donor, where identity of the donor is referred to, the occasion is also referred to, the obvious purpose or the purpose that the donor wanted people to know about, that is also on some inscriptions alluded to, and usually they were acts in generosity, acts in religiosity, which could accrue some merit to the donor and his ancestors. So the father, the grandfather, great-grandfather, they all would accrue merit on account of this deed of the donor to have donated a particular piece of land or settled village to a religious beneficiary, and subsequently even to the secular agencies, say some officials or some people, in lieu of what earlier could have been an income from their salaries. So in lieu of the service rendered in administration and so forth, but that comes little later. Now, R.S. Sharma, who has worked on Indian feudalism and who proposes that in the post-Gupta period, later Gupta period and post-Gupta period, we increasingly get to see this trend of making such land grants which are not only tax free but also free from administrative control of the donor, gaining popularity in the later Vedic, in the later Gupta period. Now, the grants by themselves wouldn't say as to what compelled these rulers to make these grants, or what compelled people to make such grants, which obviously by 5th and 6th century CE is becoming almost so common. So the written purpose apart, the actual position, the actual situation that could have led the donors to resort to this practice, as per him, as per R.S. Sharma, is that there was some kind of a crisis of revenue mopping up exercise, and perhaps it is no more easy for the ruling class to get that revenue the way they were so used to getting it without much of a trouble or problem. But now the taxpayers are perhaps resisting the idea of paying taxes to the center, and it is this crisis, it is this political necessity that compelled the ruling class to start granting land and villages alongside administrative rights. And this is something which is resorted to not only by the Gupta emperors but also their feudatories and even private individuals. They are resorting to this, And this he refers to as Kali age crisis. Why he refers to this as Kali age crisis? Because Kali age as a term is used in several contemporary texts of the Gupta period, say in several Puranas, which probably were written around this time. They talk of Kali age. So what is this Kali age? Kali age, it bemoans the loss of times where everything was all right and things were as per order of things, the ideal order of things. But now the taxpayers who otherwise or who normatively should have been paying taxes are refusing to pay taxes, and so there is an inversion of that ideal type, and this is how Kali age is generally described in these texts. Now, there are historians who don't agree with this, and they say that, well, Kali age is nothing more than some kind of a literary metaphor to express things, and it should not be understood with reference to something real, the way R. S. Sharma makes it out to be. So R. S. Sharma is reading some kind of a political, social, economic crisis beneath the description of Kali age, whereas other historians don't regard it as anything more than a literary metaphor. Nevertheless, let's first understand what this proposition of Kali age crisis is all about and how it is leading to feudalization. So these grants by the Gupta emperors, feudatories, and even private individuals, what it is doing, it is helping in creating a powerful strata of landed intermediaries. So what are these intermediaries? You have the tillers who actually till the soil, and you have the ruler who is on the top of it, and in between that, due to this practice of land grants becoming very fashionable, so what happens is that the tiller and the king, that relationship is mediated by a number of powerful intermediaries, and it is in this context that the framework of feudalism acquires pertinence. So one of the essential attributes of feudalism is that it should have landed intermediaries. And R. S. Sharma tells us that there are very many landed intermediaries operating between the actual tiller and the ruler in the later Gupta period and in the post-Gupta period as well. These land grants are leading to something else as well in terms of economy. We have been talking of the Mauryan economy, we have been talking of the post-Mauryan economy, and there we refer to the fact that in the Mauryan times it was so usual to come across large state farms worked by hired laborers, slaves, and other kinds of labor for agrarian production and so forth. But in the post-Mauryan period, the land holding size becomes small, and if you look at the Gupta period, particularly the later half of the Gupta period and post-Gupta period, this process of or this practice of land grants is leading to further fragmentation of land holding size. So there are inscriptions of the period that are referred to or that are alluded to with reference to Kalchuri, Chedi era, and also the ones by Maitrak rulers of Vallabhi in Gujarat. They generally speak of not a very large size of fields. So they are in general talking of small size fields, small size agricultural fields. So this is the impression that we get out of these evidences that are inscriptional in nature, and that tells us that perhaps the average land holding size in the Gupta period is is smaller than that of what characterized the Mauryan landholding size and so forth, and that goes on well with the proposition of feudalism or feudalization or fragmentation of landholding size as a consequence of land grants. So that is it up to this point, and we shall take up the other part of the lecture in the next section, and we shall continue with our discussion of this stage only, which is the Gupta period leading to feudalization of Indian economy. Thank you.